In 1901, a storm forced a crew of sponge divers to shelter near a tiny Greek island called Antikythera. They found a shipwreck, bronze statues, coins, pottery, and one corroded lump of bronze the size of a shoebox. Nobody thought twice about it. It sat in a museum drawer for 2 years. And then, someone noticed a gear embedded in the corrosion. One gear, then another, then another. By the time modern X-ray tomography peered inside, what stared back was impossible. At least 30 interlocking, hand-cut bronze gears. An analog computer, built 2,000 years ago. It tracked the sun, the moon, eclipses, and the 5 visible planets. Nothing this mechanically complex appears again in the human record for another 1,400 years. Someone in the ancient Greek world understood differential gearing. And then, that knowledge died at sea. Think about that for a moment. 1,400 years. That is the entire span from the fall of Rome to the Renaissance. An abyss of lost knowledge stretching across centuries of plague, war, and collapsed empires. During that gap, humanity forgot how to build this, not lost a recipe, not misplaced a blueprint, forgot an entire branch of engineering. The kind of thinking that takes gears meshing at different speeds and turns them into a prediction of the cosmos. This was not a clock. A clock tells you what time it is. This machine told you what the sky would do tomorrow, next month, next year, and decades from now. It modeled the irregular orbit of the moon using a differential mechanism. 2 inputs combined to produce 1 output, the earliest known differential gear in human history. And it was cutting bronze in a workshop before the Roman Empire reached its peak. Think about what that means. Somewhere in the Greek world, there was a person, or perhaps a lineage of craftsmen, who held an understanding of mechanics so advanced that when their knowledge vanished, humanity did not recover it until the 14th century. Every clockwork mechanism in medieval Europe, every astronomical automaton, every geared device that would crawl out of monasteries over the next millennium and a half, all of it was a shadow of what lay in that corroded lump at the bottom of the Mediterranean. The ship sank sometime around 60 BC. We do not know its name. We do not know its crew. What we know is that it was a Roman-era cargo vessel, likely carrying looted Greek treasures back to Rome, and it hit a storm near Antikythera and went down in about 60 meters of water. For 2,000 years, it sat there. Bronze statues, marble, glass, coins, amphorae, and inside the wreck, protected by the silt and the dark, a device no one expected. When the sponge divers pulled it up in 1901, they did not know what they had. It was just a lump. Corrosion had fused it into a single block. For decades, scholars argued. Was it an astrolabe? A navigation tool? A planetarium? A toy? Fragmentary inscriptions in ancient Greek surfaced on the outer surface. Words like sun, Venus, eclipse. But the inscriptions were barely legible, and the inside was sealed shut by corrosion. The object was broken. Only about 3/4 of the original device survived, and even that was shattered into dozens of pieces. For most of the 20th century, it remained a mystery wrapped in rust. Then came X-ray tomography. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, researchers led by the mathematician Tony Freeth and the imaging expert Roger Hadland bombarded the fragments with high-energy X-rays. Not surface photographs, 3-dimensional computed tomography. Slice by slice, the machine that had been sealed for 2 millennia began to open. What the scans showed was staggering. Gears stacked in layers, precision-cut teeth, some smaller than a millimeter across, pin and slot mechanisms, engraved scales marked with astronomical cycles, and inscriptions, thousands of characters, compressed onto tiny plates like an instruction manual written in microscopic Greek. The device had at least 30 gears, each one hand-cut from a single sheet of bronze, each one meshing with the next at a specific tooth count to produce a precise mathematical ratio. The front face had concentric rings. The back face had two spiral dials, one tracking 19 years, the other tracking 18. This was not a toy. It was a mechanical model of the solar system, an astronomical computer built from bronze and operated by a single hand crank. Here is where it gets genuinely frightening. The moon does not move in a perfect circle around the Earth. Its orbit is elliptical, which means its speed across the sky changes. Ancient astronomers knew this. The Babylonians had tracked it for centuries, but to reproduce that changing speed mechanically, to take a single steady input from a hand crank and convert it into an output that speeds up and slows down, you need something extraordinary. You need a differential. The Antikythera mechanism contains a pin and slot device on one of its gears that functions exactly like a differential. Two gears mounted slightly off-center from each other, connected by a pin sliding in a slot. As the main gear turns, the pin rides in the slot, adding and subtracting motion in a way that reproduces the moon's variable angular velocity. This is the same principle that allows a car's drive wheels to turn at different speeds around a corner, and it was cut from bronze 2,000 years ago. The person who designed this understood non-uniform circular motion and encoded it in metal. On the back of the mechanism, one spiral dial stretches across 223 months. This is the Saros cycle. The ancient Babylonians discovered that eclipses repeat on a cycle of 223 lunar months, roughly 18 years. Whatever eclipse you see today, the same geometry will produce a similar eclipse 18 years later. The Antikythera mechanism tracked this, but it did more than count. Embedded in the spiral dial were tiny inscriptions. Each one marked a specific eclipse, and each inscription told you not just when, but what kind: solar or lunar, the time of day or night, and in some cases, the direction and even the expected character of the shadow. A single turn of the crank could carry you decades into the future, and the pointer on the Saros dial would land on a marked cell. That cell told you an eclipse was coming. You could crank the machine forward past your own death, past your children's lifetime, and read the shadow of the moon from a bronze plate. This was prophecy, built from gears. The other back dial tracked the Metonic cycle. 19 years. The Greek astronomer Meton realized that 19 solar years almost exactly equal 235 lunar months. After 19 years, the calendar and the moon realign. The Antikythera mechanism encoded this in a 5-turn spiral. One turn of the pointer advanced the cycle by a fixed number of months, and after 5 full loops, you had traveled 19 years into the future. But there was more. A subsidiary dial tracked the 4-year Olympiad cycle. Not for astronomy, for the Olympic Games. The mechanism told you when the games would be held. It was a calendar, an almanac, an eclipse predictor, a planet tracker, and a cultural clock, all in one device the size of a thick book. The builder packed more astronomical knowledge into a shoebox than most civilizations possessed in their entire libraries. And they did it without electricity, without telescopes, without modern mathematics. They did it with bronze, pins, and teeth cut by hand. The front face of the mechanism has long been debated, but recent reconstructions propose that it displayed the positions of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Each planet had its own pointer. Each pointer was driven by a train of gears whose tooth counts encoded that planet's synodic period. the time it takes to return to the same position relative to the Sun and Earth. To make a pointer trace the looping retrograde motion of Mars, the builder needed to combine multiple rotations and subtract one from another. This required compound gear trains with specific ratios drawn directly from Babylonian astronomical tables. The front face would have shown the Sun, the Moon, and all 5 planets arranged in zodiacal order. A single crank moved everything simultaneously. You turned the handle and the entire solar system moved. The Sun advanced through the zodiac. The Moon swung through its phases. Mars looped backward. Jupiter crept forward. All of it driven by interlocking bronze wheels smaller than coins. The inscriptions on the mechanism are in Koine Greek, the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC. The dialect and letter forms point to a workshop in Rhodes or Corinth, around 150 to 60 BC. Rhodes was a center of astronomy and mechanical philosophy. The astronomer Hipparchus worked there. The philosopher Posidonius taught there. The device may have been built in the same intellectual world that produced the Antikythera astronomer, whoever that was. We do not have their name, we have only their work, and the fact that they understood something about the universe and about metal that no one else would understand for a very long time. The inscriptions even include a phrase that translates to a parapegma, a star calendar marking the rising and setting of key stars throughout the year. The builder knew the night sky intimately. They tracked the seasons by the stars. They predicted the shadow of the moon, and they compressed all of it into bronze. The ship sank carrying this device. It went down in a storm, and the knowledge went with it. Perhaps the builder died. Perhaps the workshop burned. Perhaps the students scattered. Perhaps the Romans, who valued conquest more than computation, simply did not care. What we know is this: the last person who fully understood how to build the Antikythera mechanism may have been standing on the deck of the very ship that carried it. When the vessel went down, the machine was sealed in silt, and the knowledge was sealed in silence. For 14 centuries, humanity walked forward without it. Clocks returned, gears returned, astronomical instruments returned. But the Antikythera mechanism lay in its drawer, unrecognized. It waited. 2,000 years of salt water and silence, and then a storm drove divers to shelter, and a hand reached into the mud and pulled out a question we still cannot fully answer. Who built this? How did they know what they knew? And what else did they understand that we will never find, because it is still sitting at the bottom of the sea, corroding, in the dark, where no one will ever look?